Hello students, today's agenda is to check homework. We'll be learning about the secant and cosecant, and you will be able to work on 10.6. Today students will be able to find the secant and cosecant of special angles using the unit circle. And before we start, I recommend that you have this in a flashcard, but I recommend that you have these other ones from the previous lesson in the back and this in the front, or all on the same flashcard. And the reason is that it's easier to just look at that and have it in front of you, and also to study it. However, just because it fits better in the screening here, if I put them right on my paper, this is going to be the one for secant. Is secant of theta equals 1 divided by the cosine of that same angle, or that theta. Okay, so the cosecant of theta is going to be equals to 1 divided by sine of theta. And for me to remember it, what I did is like, oh, if you think of secant, it would make sense that it goes with sine, but no, it's with cosine, the opposite. And cosecant goes with sine, not with cosine, right? Secant with cosine and cosecant with sine. Okay, so they kind of go with the opposite. Hopefully that trick will help you, but if not, have this handy. Okay, so secant of 30 is right here, and we say that it's going to be 1 divided by cosine. Okay, for the secant, it's cosine. 1 divided by cosine. Cosine is the first value, which is going to be the square root of 3 over 2. And when we have something like this, you just put it over 1 and multiply the outer values over the inner values. So 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times the square root of 3 is 3. If they ask you to simplify, then go ahead, but sometimes that's all you have to do so that you can see how the secant and cosecant are reciprocal, just like we saw with tangent and cotangent in the previous lesson. Okay, however, if they say no, you need to rationalize, simplify it more, you're going to multiply by 1 square root of 3 over square root of 3. That's just like dividing and you get a 1, right? When you multiply by 1, you're not changing that value. And so 2 times square root of 3 is 2 square root of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9. This cannot be simplified anymore, so it's just 2 times the square root of 3 over the square root of 9 is 3. So rationalize or simplify, that's the answer. Secant of 45 is, and I should write it in here, 1 over cos. Remember that is the opposite, okay? So cosine of 45, which is 1 over 1. I'm just going to put it over as 1 over 1 so that I can do this outer and inner. And cosine of 45, cosine is the first value, which is square root of 2 over 2. I multiply the outer values. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times square root of 2 is square root of 2. Again, if they don't ask to simplify, just leave it as that. But if you have to simplify, then you multiply by the denominator. Why do we have to simplify? Because we cannot have a square root in the denominator. So to get rid of it, you just multiply by itself, and that's a square of whatever is inside. So the square cancels the square root. So 2 times the square root of 2 is 2 square root of 2 over square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is square root of 4, which is 2. Square root of 4 is 2. In here, you just bring it over. But 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 times square root of 2 is just square root of 2. So again, if they don't ask you to simplify, this is the answer. If they ask you to rationalize or simplify, this would be the answer. For the next one, secant of 60 degrees is right here. Again, is 1 divided by the cosine of that same angle. and it's 1. I'm just going to write it as 1 over 1 divided by cosine of 60. The cosine is always the first value, the x value. Okay, and so outer values and inner values. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. And 2 divided by 1 is 2. And that's my answer. Okay, cosecant is 1 over sine of 30-degree angle. Okay, and so the 30-degree angles in here, sine 1 divided by sine of 30. Sine is the y value, right? Sine is on the y value. So it's going to be 1. I'm just going to write it as 1 over 1 to make it easier when we do the division, over sine, which is 1 over 2. Multiply the outer values and the inner values. The outers go on the numerator. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. And 2 divided by 1 is 2. So now I want you to check something in here. What does this formula mean? So now that we have these values, and we're going to be looking at the ones that are not simplified. Okay, let me have this in pink as well. These are not simplified, but I want you to check something out. Secant of 30 is equals to 2 over the square root of 3. What is the cosine of that 30? Cosine of the 30 is equals to square root of 3 over 2, right? And so look at those values. Square root of 3 over 2, 2 over the square root of 3. Okay, that's what this formula mean, that they are reciprocal of each other. The secant is the reciprocal of the cosine of 30. Okay, so this is going to be the same thing. The secant of 45 is going to be the reciprocal for cosine of 45. And the cosine of 45 is the square root of 2 over 2. Now looking here, the 2 goes up, the square root of 2 goes down. So they're reciprocal of each other. Okay, so that you can just see that difference or similarity actually. And so the cosine of 60 is going to be the reciprocal of 2. Well, cosine of 60 is 1 over 2. 1 over 2 is the same as, is the reciprocal of 2 over 1, but we don't need the 1 in there, okay? So that's what this formula means again. So it's going to be the same thing for cosecant. That's going to be the reciprocal of the sine. So if your professors or teachers don't ask you, but I will be asking for this, for the process, they can just say, oh, what is the cosecant of 30? Cosecant of 30 is the reciprocal of sine. The sine is 1/2, so it's just going to be equals to 2. Because it's 1/2, you just switch them, okay? That's how simple it is. But I'm going to ask you that you put 1 over the sine of 30. So 1 is 1 over 1. The sine of 30 is the second value, which is 1 over 2. Multiply the outer and inner values. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. And 2 divided by 1 is equals to 2. See, these are reciprocal of each other. So the next one is 1 divided by, again, cosecant is 1 over sine of 45-degree angle. And so 1 is 1 over 1 over the sine of 45 is square root of 2 over 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times square root of 2 is square root of 2. If they don't ask you to simplify, that will be the answer. But again, what is the sine of 45? 45 is square root of 2 over 2. See, they're the reciprocal of each other. And if they ask you to simplify more, Then you're going to multiply by this denominator in the numerator and denominator. That's what you're going to put. You get this denominator and multiply it by that in the numerator and denominator. So 2 times the square root of 2 is 2, square root of 2. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is square root of 4, which can be simplified. And so we just bring this over. Square root of 4 is 2. This cancels because it's equals to 1. And so you just get square root of 2. For cosecant of 60. Cosecant of 60 is 1 over sine, not cosine, but sine, right, of 60-degree angle. So the 1 is just going to be 1 over 1. And so the 60-degree angle is going to be square root of 3 over 2. We multiply the outer values. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times square root of 3 is square root of 3. If they don't ask you to simplify, that's the answer. Notice how these are reciprocal, the sine of 60 and the cosecant of 60, reciprocal of each other. We multiply by whatever is in the denominator. 2 times square root of 3. 2 times the square root of 3 is 2, square root of 3. Square over the square root of 9. 2 square root of 3 over 3, and that's all. Let's see if you remember the formula. For the secant is 1 over cosine of that angle, 90-degree angle. So in here, I'm not going to put 1 over 1 because the cosine of 90 is not a fraction like the other ones. For the 90 is just 0 for the cosine. So it's 1 divided by 0. Remember that we cannot divide by 0 because in the calculator it becomes error. 1 divided by 0 equals, it says divide by 0, error. You cannot divide by 0. And so the answer that we put in here is going to be undefined. Okay. Now for the cosecant, remember that is not the cosine, right? Not the reciprocal of cosine, but the reciprocal of the sine of that same angle. And it's going to be equals to 1 over, again, because that value, sine is on the y value, that's not a fraction. I don't need to put it 1 over 1. It's just 1. And then this, so we bring over the 1. Sine of 90 is 1. And so 1 divided by 1 is 1. So how does this compare? The cosine, right, which is the reciprocal of secant, the cosine of 90 degrees is equal to 0, and 0 is reciprocal of undefined. For this one, the sine of 90-degree angle is equals to 1. I didn't write in here. And 1 is the reciprocal of 1, because 1 over 1 is equals to the reciprocal of 1 over 1. Okay. For the next set, we're going to be using the unit circle again, but instead of looking at the degrees, we're going to be looking at the radians. And so secant of pi over 4, which is right here, remember that 1 over the cosine of pi over 4. Okay, and so 1 over the cosine of pi over 4 is the square root of 2 over 2. We put this over 1. Multiply the outer values and the inner values. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times the square root of 2 is 2. Again, if we need to rationalize, multiply by that. If not, this will be the not simplified answer. This becomes 2 square root of 2. This becomes the square root of 4. This, we just bring it over. And this one we simplify, square root of 4 is 2. These cancel, and you get the square root of 2. You can notice in here is the cosine of pi over 4. that we substitute in here, and these are exactly the reciprocal of each other. Square root of 2 is down here, the 2 is over here. Okay, for the next one, same thing, 1 over the cosine of pi over 3. The pi over 3, remember that is with the 60, the 3 with the 6. And so 1 over cosine will be 1/2. We put this over 1, multiply the outer and the inner. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1, which is equals to 2. Again, 1/2, which is the cosine of that angle, is the reciprocal of the secant, which is 2 over 1, but simplified, okay? They're reciprocal of each other. And so the cosecant doesn't have a co in here, it's just sine of that same angle. Okay, and so the sine of pi over 6 is right here. We're going to put 1 as 1 over 1. Sine of pi over 6 is 1/2. Remember that the sine is the second value. And we multiply the outer and the inner. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. And so 2 divided by 1 is 2. Again, the sine is 1/2. The cosecant is 2. They are reciprocal of each other. The next one, cosecant, doesn't have a co in here. It only has 1 over sine over pi over 2. The sine of pi over 2, sine is the second value, which is a 1, and 1 divided by 1 is 1. 1 is always reciprocal of each other because 1 over 1 is the same, the reciprocal of 1 over 1. Secant, 1 over cosine of that same angle. So 3/4 of pi, it's over here, 3/4 of pi. And the cosine has a negative, so, and it's a fraction, so I'm going to put 1 over 1 for the numerator. Okay, and it's just to be able to multiply the outer and the inner, otherwise we're not going to have one of the values. And divided by cosine of that angle in radians, which is negative square root of 2 over 2. We multiply the outer values. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times negative 2. And actually the negative, you can just put it in the middle, actually. It doesn't matter. 1 times square root of 2 is square root of 2. If they don't ask you to rationalize, that will be the answer. Oh, that was in pink. And you multiply by the square root of 2 on both sides. Again, bring over the negative. 2 times square root of 2 is 2 square root of 2. 2 square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4. And that becomes negative 2 square root of 2 over 2. This cancels, or we can say negative 2 divided by 2 is negative, and then we just say square root of 2. So that's going to be my answer. And if you notice, the cosine of 3 pi over 4 is negative square root of 2 over 2 in 2 over the square root of 2. Okay, the reciprocal of each other. And that's if it's not simplified, of course. Last one. Cosecant is 1 over sine of that same angle. Whoops. So that's 1 over 1 divided by the sine of 3 pi over 4, which is positive because it's the value on y. It's positive square root of 2 over 2. We multiply the outer. 1 times 2 is 2 and goes in the numerator. The inner values, when we multiply them, it goes in the denominator. And if you realize, the only difference between these two is the negative, but let's multiply them. Times the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. And that equals to 2 times the square root of 2 is 2 square root of 2 divided by square root of 4. 2 square root of 2, the square root of 4 is 2. This cancels, and the answer is square root of 2. So looking here, for the sine of 3 pi over 4 is this value right here. If we don't simplify, that's the value of the cosecant, so they are reciprocal of each other. If you can please give us a thumbs up, subscribe here. Here is the next video on the unit, and the entire playlist for this unit is on this side. Please share, but overall, don't forget to have fun.